All right, we're live.
Hi, everyone. We're going to wait just about a minute or so and then get started. All right, you want to get started?
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. So, hi, everyone. I'm Helen Partlow. I'm an attorney at Waypoint Immigration, and I specialize in EB-2 NIW applications. So, we're going to talk about things, generally. If you wanted to get any sort of specific advice on your own specific application, profile, anything else, we do free profile assessments on our website. So, you can go ahead and, submit that for free. It's a couple of questions and your resume to get specific advice, because obviously talking to everybody here, going to be just talking in general terms. Um, so before we get started on this specific topic, I'm going to just generalize NIW. So this is the National Interest Waiver. It's the second preference employment-based category for a green card. You do not need an employer to sponsor you. You can bring this application on your own. It does not grant you any sort of a status or any sort of employment authorization until you get your green card. So for everyone around the world, there is a backlog of at least 3 to 5 years. Those from China and especially India are much longer than that. So if you are already in America or want to come to America before you would get your green card in hand, you would have to do so on another visa, such as an H-1B or something like that. If you are already here on H-1B, because that's the most popular amongst everyone I talk to anyway, with this approval, you would be able to renew your H-1B into the future. If you had a spouse that was an H-4 holder, they would be able to apply for an EAD with the H-1B approval with their I-140. So there's a lot of different bonuses to it. You can change jobs. It follows you and the work that you're claiming to do that's in the national interest. So it's not tied to your employer, but of course you would have to stay in whatever your visa category is to make sure you still are an H-1B, or if you're on F1 OPT or anything like that, that all has to stay aligned throughout the whole process. So we like to say the NIW is like the first stage, and then the second stage would either be going through consular processing if you're outside of America, or adjusting your status if you're inside America. So going along with that, you can also be from anywhere in the world and apply for an NIW. You don't have to already be here. But you do have to show how you would be impactful once you came if you were not already here. And that can be, usually done through different ways, different arguments and things like that. So going along with how to prove any of this is what we're going to be talking about today, is what kind of evidence do you need for your strong EB-2 NIW application? So, obviously this varies individually for each individual person. Someone that is a researcher, you would want to obviously show your publications, your citations, your Google Scholar profile or ResearchGate profile, maybe show a citation map as to who has been citing to you, where have they been cited, what kind of publication, what kind of publisher or what kind of journal, media, major media or trade publication, where was it put in. This may not be applicable to someone that's in the industry. So where someone may not have publications and it's not really typical. But if you do have a publication, whether you are a researcher profile or in the tech field or some sort of industry field where it's not normal, you definitely want to show evidence of not just what was published, but how did it get published? Or, what kind of criteria did it have to meet? Was it peer reviewed? What kind of journal is this? Maybe they have some really strict metrics where they only accept certain types of applications, publications, or they had some sort of criteria they had to show. So you're not just showing for a publication, the publication itself, you're showing where it was published and how did it get published. We also can show like the impact factor if that is, something that is an added strength. It's not always an added strength. Sometimes it's a lower impact factor, of which then we would just probably not include that information because we could show the stronger part of the application, which would be more along the lines of the peer review and the process of how it got published. Of course, if there's any impact of it after being published, like if it helps set something new in the industry, or like I said, citations, or if it helped implement something, proof of that is good. So with publications, you're kind of looking for not just, like I said, not just the publication itself, but all these other supporting evidences help really give context to the officer as to, okay, here's this here's this article or, publication or whatever it is. I'm not really sure what that means. So by giving this extra information about the process of it, how it was used, what kind of citations came from it, that all helps give the officer that context. Because if you just show me a publication, I'm going to say, okay, well, I can read what you wrote and what you wrote about, but I'm not really sure what impact did that have. Like, what came of it? Did anything come of it? Did no one read it? Like, is it published in a place that no one's ever going to see? Because it could be the greatest publication in the world, but if it's published in a place that no one's ever going to read it, really, what kind of value does it bring then? So you're kind of giving it more value and more of a boost if you can show these other things surrounding that publication. And your publication should also be in the realm of your proposed endeavor. So your proposed endeavor is how you will impact America in the future. What's your future plan? What does that look like? If your documents that you're showing don't align, like sometimes people pivot in their degrees or in their experience in their jobs, and they have publications that are completely off topic, then that's not going to help prove that you're capable of doing your proposed endeavor. So everything that you have done should align with that future goal. And so, that's why I say, like, sometimes people in undergrad do publications and they kind of switch gears in their master's or further in their PhD. You don't want to have to just show every publication you've ever done. If you are a researcher, you might have so many. You want to make sure that you are choosing the ones that are the most impactful and related to your proposed endeavor. So, if you have a ton, like 24 articles, you may not want to include all 24 articles in your application and really kind of strategically pick the ones that make the most sense. Which ones have the most impact, which ones have the most citations, which one is the most unique thing that you have brought to the industry, which ones kind of made the most waves. Did you present it at conferences? Did you present any of them externally as any sort of speaking engagement? Do they all kind of relate to maybe a patent that also kind of coincides with it? So it's kind of like seeing everything and all these different puzzle pieces as to how to maybe pick and choose which ones to highlight if you do happen to have a lot. So then going back to, conferences and speaking engagements, a lot of people in industry do these things too, and they don't necessarily have publications. They can also do technical poster presentations or white papers and things like that. So if you do any sort of speaking engagement or, at a conference or something that is hopefully, prestigious enough to mention in the application, You don't want to just include your invitation, because if you only include your invitation as the officer, I'm saying, okay, well, they were invited, but did they go? Did anything come of it? It's kind of like showing step one when I really want to know all the steps. So, if you did get an email or a letter invitation, obviously you can include that. I would also include if you did take any pictures while you were there. Pictures don't always, like, pictures alone are not enough, but when you're combining it with all of these other things, they can kind of help show some things. It all depends on what kind of evidence you could find. If there's some sort of an agenda or program that shows that you're listed as a speaker and, maybe what your presentation topic is or what date and time you are presenting and where, that all definitely helps. If you have any sort of follow-up documentation, like a thank you email, or sometimes people get like a certificate of appreciation for like attending, or not just attending rather, but speaking, like some sort of speaking document that confirms that you were there. um it's also good to show information on the conference itself, or if it's not a conference specifically, like what kind of organization ran, like where did you speak? Who organized it? Who was in attendance? So with the conferences, something like the IEEE, they have a lot of documentation that shows like what their conferences are about. And like, the IEEE is obviously huge. A lot of people are in the IEEE. They have a lot of different like subsections and chapters and things like that. So, but I wouldn't want to just show about the IEEE because they are so big. I would want to show about this specific conference you did at the IEEE. So usually there's some sort of landing page that they have on their website, that kind of gets people to sign up to attend, or they maybe do a call for presentation people to submit, some sort of an idea on what to present. These are all collective things that we can show as a paper trail, that you actually did this thing. And, what was it about? How was it impactful? If you can maybe, I mean, we don't always do this, but it could make sense for some profiles to maybe get a letter from someone that attended, or something that shows what your impact was for this letter. I mean, for this conference presentation. Anything that kind of shows the before, the during, and the after is really the most ideal. Excuse me. Um, so yeah, sometimes we get clients that submit things and it's only about the before. And that's why I'm saying, like, you can't just say, oh, I got invited and here's proof, because it doesn't mean that you did it, and that doesn't mean there's any results. So I want to know, were you invited? What happened before? What happened during the conference? Is there any proof of that on the website, program, some sort of agenda, pictures of you presenting, any and all of those combinations? And then after, any aftermath, thank you email, maybe a certificate thanking you officially. Maybe you got some sort of an email from someone that saw your presentation and they wanted to comment about, it made some sort of impact on them, or it made them think about something in a new way, or whatever the case may be. You might also get a reference letter from someone like that who attended, not just an organizer of the conference. So there's a bunch of different things that we kind of look at. And usually most people don't submit all of these things. So in an ideal world, you would submit all of these things, because then that kind of really, makes it undeniable to the officer that this thing happened in the way that makes sense to how we're describing it. But it's some sort of combination of things like what I'm saying is what we would like to see. So that's conferences. If you did like a judge role on like a panel, or maybe you did some peer review. So if you do peer review, again, you would probably get some sort of email invitation. You would get maybe some sort of, so that's the before, some sort of email before showing that you were invited and accepted or something like that. And then you would get the actual peer review activity in and of itself. Maybe you have a login where you get like a dashboard and you see different things that you have to review. So maybe a screenshot of your dashboard, kind of something that shows the types of things you're reviewing, I think is always good. Because we want to make sure it all aligns with that proposed endeavor. If I'm a chemist and I'm reviewing papers for some journal that's in chemistry, that all aligns. But if I'm a chemist, I'm reviewing, like the latest fashion trends or something like that. Obviously, that does not align. So, we have to always make sure that it aligns to what you are doing, that it all makes sense, goes towards that pathway that we're telling the story of in the application itself. So, again, invite something about it, being a peer reviewer, dashboard, maybe some sort of evidence of what you've peer reviewed. Maybe you have some notes that you submitted back on like your impression of these things as you're doing your peer review. And then after, hopefully you would get some sort of email, or again, some sort of document that says, thank you for being a peer reviewer, something that kind of confirms the activity also. Obviously, if it's ongoing, that's totally fine. Just kind of give some sort of indication as to the things that have been already completed. But if you are continuing to do these things, that's also good, because part of the NIW is showing your future plan. So, the idea is that if you have already been impactful, then you can continue to be impactful. So, these are kind of activities that should be, genuine to what your job is and your contributions are to your industry. And then it should be something that you're thinking of continuing to do also in the future, because the proposed endeavor really is future focused. Everything I'm saying is what we would argue in the second prong of the well-positioned argument, that you are well positioned to do your proposed endeavor because you have all this experience and knowledge and you've been impactful already. So therefore, you're more likely to be impactful in the future. So all of this together, we have to show by a preponderance of the evidence that you're more likely than not to do these things. And that's like about a 51% threshold. But in reality, definitely I'm seeing like a higher threshold in reality, with the officers and any of the RFEs we've been getting. So that's why I'm saying like comprehensive evidence really can just stand on its own, and the petition letter really just kind of strings it all together as part of your story. But your evidence in and of itself should be strong to show these sorts of things. So far I've been talking about different industry contributions. Let's talk a bit about what you would need to show from your job. So your job, I look for things like an offer letter, if you've gotten any sort of performance reviews or salary increases, promotions, any sort of internal feedback, whether that be like officially through the performance review, or it could be through an email or like a Slack message or like a Google chat message. I mean, we use Google Chat, so that's why I say that. Any sort of, email from a coworker or from your boss or something saying, oh, nice work on this or that. Any sort of internal reports, maybe something that shows your measurable outcomes of the work that you've done. I see a lot of things on resumes like, increased productivity by 12% on this project. Anything that can show that 12% that you mentioned on your resume is good. Anything that, if you save money, like, saved $200,000 by increasing efficiency, whatever it is. Like when I'm talking to someone in a consultation, I'm obviously looking at their resume, and a lot of resumes do have these action things on there, these measurable outcomes that you're claiming that you have been a part of. We need proof of that. So I'm looking for proof of those measurable outcomes, as specifically as we can. Sometimes it's definitely harder to kind of get those clear documents that prove those things. So we get as much as we possibly can to show that the officer, oh yeah, when I'm looking at all the evidence, yeah, it does make sense that this person is doing those things, because that's really what it comes down to. There's no one specific form of evidence that the officer is going to say, oh, I see this on their exhibit list, they're approved. They're looking at everything. So everything together has to show that this person is doing these things. Maybe some other things is like, an organizational chart if you lead a team or if you're leading a project or something like that, to show that you're in a leader position and that you are managing people underneath you on projects. Maybe you've done some sort of internal presentation for your team or your division or your boss or something like that to kind of talk about your project. Sometimes the companies will put out press releases announcing something that's new, and you are part of that project that is new, some new program, some new tech thing, some new product, whatever the case is. Even though your name is not necessarily on that press release, it does talk about what that project is, and it sometimes gives results of that project or projected results, like what the goal of the project is, and then you can tie your name specifically to the project through something else. So it's all about giving the officer an idea as to what you are doing, giving them a paper trail. Paper trail is obviously always important because, no one is going and talking to the officer. We're talking to the officer through the documents. So the stronger the documents you can provide, the stronger the application, because the application, we can describe and tell your story, but without any proof to back it up, it's just not going to be approved. Anyone could say anything, but it's really those objective documents that really are what pushes everything over the edge. We also can kind of help tell the story and tie you to these things through reference letters, but reference letters, again, alone are not enough because people can say whatever in reference letters. They need objective evidence to back up the reference letters and the application. So everything kind of hinges on that. So that's really everything that we talk about. And that's all, again, with that second prong of well-positioned, looking for evidence of all these things you're doing. Maybe one more example is if you're mentoring, we want to know what kind of organization are you mentoring through. We want to see, is this outside of your job duties? Because if you are mentoring and it's just part of your daily job, that does not really count as being impactful beyond your company, because that's only impacting your company. So we want to know, how are you mentoring? How many people are you mentoring? What organization are you mentoring it through? Is there any sort of emails, correspondence, maybe a meeting time, maybe notes that are taken? Maybe you have something official from the organization saying, oh, yes, you're accepted as a mentor, and, here are your people that you're assigned, or whatever it is. So just kind of thinking about when you're looking at your own application, your own profile, and things that you have accomplished, think, okay, how can I prove that? Because that's really what we're doing here. We need to prove, and it doesn't have to be, again, it doesn't have to be all in the one golden exhibit. It's looking at everything collectively. So it's really giving a little bit of a paper trail. So, I'm thinking of Hansel and Gretel as they're going through the forest. They're leaving little breadcrumbs. So all your little breadcrumbs have to lead them to the right place to show that you are able to get approved. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much, all of my ideas, making sure that you're thorough, that you're thinking about the before, during, and after. If it's a specific project or activity that you've done, how can you kind of string all of these things together? So if anyone has any comments, you can put it, questions rather, you could put it in the comments. If you are watching it on, the rerun, you could still put it in the comments or DM me, and we can kind of still continue the conversation.
Are EB-2 NIWs restricted due to travel ban, and can I submit an NIE?
Yeah, so there is an exception to the travel ban that's saying if your work is in the national importance aspect. So, a lot of these countries, obviously, that just came out in the travel ban. So this is an exception to those rules. For whatever reason, the government decided to ban those countries. So you still can apply for an NIW. But at that part where you would get your green card, like if your priority date comes due and this travel ban is still in existence, then you would have to maybe look into that NIE in order to get approved. But definitely having an approved NIW will help you get that NIE to actually get your green card at that second stage, through obviously consular processing, because I'm assuming that you are not in the country already. If you are already in the country, then we would go through adjustment of status and show that you have that national importance, which does tie to that exception in the travel ban. But again, there is a backlog of at least 3 to 5 years. So if you don't already have a priority date, 3 to 5 years from now, I'm hoping this travel ban is gone. So it may be a moot point for you if you're not already, already have a priority date locked in.
Our EB-2 NIWs, I think we just covered this.
Yeah.
Oh, if I'm one of the core members of the startup helping technically as well as in raising funds and bringing new projects, can you suggest ways to use this to build profile for EB-1 petition?
So if you're, I'm not really sure of the question here. I'm thinking maybe you're talking about critical role or maybe the leading role criteria for EB-1. So you can still use your own business as a like a leading role type of a thing, but I would also kind of be careful as to what is constituted as work. If you are in America on an H-1B or something else with a different company, just to make sure that you are not doing any unauthorized work. I mean, you are able to found a company and like do some initial like startup activities and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be able to comment specifically about your particular scenario. So I would definitely suggest doing an assessment. We do free assessments for both EB-1A and EB-2 NIW on our website. So we can kind of see more of what we're working with specifically for you.
Can you give some idea on the typical processing time that you're seeing for an NIW I-140 non-premium petition?
Yeah, so we're seeing about 6 to 8 months right now, but I mean, I have just talked to someone that messaged me that there's been pending for 18 months. So I mean, technically they can take up to like 2 years, and even if it goes beyond 2 years, then we would maybe have to like start getting involved with any sort of unnecessary delay sort of scenario. But yeah, on average, we've been telling people about 6 to 8, maybe 10 months. But it definitely can go longer than that.
The CIS is notorious for saying contributing continuing employment or work of one software developer for a company doesn't render value in a level commensurate of national impact.
Yeah, so continuing your job in any scenario for any industry is not a proposed endeavor. Your proposed endeavor is what the work itself is doing. So if you are developing software that is helping diagnose cancer or helping some dashboard with diagnostics and implementing AI, that is what your proposed endeavor is. If you just say my proposed endeavor is to continue working at this company, the proposed endeavor is not tied to a job. So it's about the work you are doing, about what value you bring, what kind of methods and technologies and techniques will you implement in the future to do this sort of, I gave the example of like software developing AI and healthcare. So, but it could be for any job. Like it's a giant red flag if you say my proposed endeavor is to just keep doing what I'm doing.
Can premium processing increase chances of RFE for NIW I-140 approval?
I don't know, maybe slightly, but I haven't really seen that specifically. Like typically we actually suggest doing premium processing if you have the funds available. Just because like I said, just the other question, it can take so long to do. You can also submit on regular processing and at any point upgrade to premium processing. So that is still the same fee, and then whatever date they would receive your I-907 is when they would then start that 45-day clock. So if you did do regular processing and want to change your mind, you can do that also.
Can premium processing, same question. What should be argued based on these speaking engagements and publications? These in itself, even if related to PE, is of little value if not putting context to the officer. Is it for the second prong?
Yeah, so for the second prong, we want to show how you have done things that are related to your proposed endeavor. Because if I say my proposed endeavor is to, develop software that's going to integrate AI in order to help better diagnose cancer, I got to have some technical skills. I have a history degree and a law degree. Like I'm not capable of doing any of those things. That's way outside my realm of, expertise. So by showing that you have expertise in the area of your proposed endeavor, that's how they're saying, "Oh, okay. That makes sense that this person can actually do what they're saying that they can do." If it's my profile doing that, they're going to just say, "Rejection, she can't do any of that. She hasn't ever done any of that. What makes her think she can start doing that?" So you want the officer to say, like, look, I've already been working, I have made the foundational, education or, starting expertise, experience towards these things. And therefore you're capable of doing these things in the future because it makes sense because you've done things that are related. So if your publications are related at all, even like on a foundational aspect, you could still maybe consider leveraging them, because if you are saying, again, the example I gave is like tech in healthcare with cancer diagnostics specifically. So if maybe your thing that you want to shows you that technical skill, but it's maybe not in healthcare, you can still say, okay, well, it's still part of my foundation as a tech person that is maybe not in that niche of healthcare yet, but it is showing progression. It is showing that you had this basic level of understanding, education, some sort of contribution at that tech level, which then helps you progress further into applying it in like the healthcare aspect.
If NIW I-140 petition filed by the employer is pending, one can still self-file another NIW I-140 petition separately? If yes, then what things should be taken care of for the parallel filing?
Yeah, so if your employer is filing an NIW for you, they are the petitioner. You are the beneficiary. If you do it on your own, you are the petitioner and the beneficiary. So you are capable of doing an NIW through your employer and on your own. And that is suggested, that does have some benefits to it as well.
National benefit equals influence your field at a broader level or economic impact on a depressed area. How does an employee claim that when they also claim to continue to work for the employer?
So it's not about your job. So we're not really tying your proposed endeavor to a job title or to a specific company, because if you change jobs and you go with a different company, you should still be able to pursue that proposed endeavor. So it's irregardless of any sort of boundary set by employment. So that's why I'm saying, like, it's not tied to your company, it's not tied to your job title, it's not tied to your job. So you should be able to continue to do this thing in the next job and the next step that you're taking. And it may have a different job title. It may have a different company. It might be different, but the work that you are doing is taking the next step towards whatever your proposed endeavor is.
What is judging? Mentoring hackathon should be put in context. The act in itself renders little of value, I assume.
So no, that does give value because you're showing that you are considered an expert in your field and you are sharing your expert knowledge with others in the field. So by judging something, you're using your knowledge that you have, created and continue to hone in on, and you're sharing it by being a judge. And if you're a mentor, you're definitely helping the next generation of, whatever engineers or whatever it is that your field is. So you're helping to increase the overall industry.
Being from India, does it make sense to try for EB-2 NIW since priority date is 2013 as of now?
I think that they are up to 2013 priority dates in the visa bulletin, if I'm not wrong. Like, don't quote me officially. I would have to go and double check. But so it sounds like in this scenario, maybe you have an EB-2 perm application that was approved by an employer that you had gotten, and your priority date is 2013. If you are not still with that employer, you would not be able to adjust your status through that application because you are no longer with them. So if you do an EB-2 NIW, you can use that 2013 priority date for your NIW, and that again follows you not your employer. So then you would be able to adjust your status if you got the NIW approved and they applied that 2013 date. I may not have understood that right, but that's how I interpreted the question.
I don't know what this means. Regardless, not irregardless.
I don't remember where that tied into, so.
Is there a way to have a call with you for a free profile evaluation for EB-2 and EB-1? If yes, then how?
Yeah, so the calls are not free. Our consultations are $198, but our free assessments are. So you would submit your resume and answer a couple questions through our website, waypointimmigration.org. And at the top, you'll see different tabs at the top. Appointments would be if you wanted to schedule an appointment, and the free assessment is if you wanted to put in your profile for that free assessment. And then one of our attorneys will get back to you. If you message me saying that you put it in, like I can see if I can go in specifically and look at it, but otherwise we have a team of 4 of us, 4 attorneys here at Waypoint that we just take turns 1 week a month, looking through them and replying. We all do NIWs, so.
Can you please provide an estimate of the total cost involved in submitting an EB-2 visa application, including government filing fees, attorney fees, and other associated expenses?
Yeah, sure. So we have, we do full service applications. So, if you get an RFE, we don't normally jump in at that stage or anything, but we do full service from the get-go. And I'm just looking up exactly everything so I can reply correctly. Okay, so yeah, we have a flat fee of $96.05 that includes all the filing fees, personal strategy, document review and feedback. We also draft the reference letters for you. About 3 or 4 is our typical. We do the forms, we do all the research, we write the application, we ship it overnight, and that includes the regular filing fees, which I think is $300 and $715. If you did want to do premium processing, that government fee is $28.05. We don't charge extra for that. If anyone did want to do that, that's up to the person if they want to do regular or if they want to do premium. But yeah, we're very upfront with all of that. We include everything.
All right, last question. Yeah, so what should an employee show how they plan to continue their pursuit, like doing job and personal research at the same time, or just in their job but could be for a different employer?
Yeah, so your proposed endeavor doesn't necessarily have to be at the job that you are at. We do have some clients that they're pursuing their proposed endeavor outside of their employment on their own with their own research and their own like product development and things like that. So, you would say that, oops, sorry, trying to clean my glasses here. They got smudgy. So you would say with your proposed endeavor, what kind of methods will you implement? What kind of techniques will you use? What technologies can you use? What do you see happening in the short term? What do you see happening in the long term? Maybe you have, a goal of trying to, reach some sort of benchmark or milestone in the next couple years, and then, work towards your proposed endeavor on the long-term basis. And it depends obviously on what your field is. It also depends, is building a business part of that? Sometimes that is part of a proposed endeavor. If it is part of your proposed endeavor and it is something that you want to do right away, you have to show additional things like business plan, financial backing, potential customers, clients, business partners, strategies, and stuff like that. On top of the business itself has to also be doing work in the national importance. So it's not just about, I couldn't just make a pool company and go around installing pools. That has an economic impact, but that work in and of itself is not of the national interest. So the work of the business has to also be in the national interest. So I think I got a little off topic with that question, but hopefully I answered it.
Do you want to take one more question, or?
Yeah, one more is fine, and then I know we're definitely over time.
Yeah. What I meant was backlog is really high for people from India, so does it still make sense to apply for EB-2 NIW in this situation?
Yeah, so if you get an NIW, you can lock in your priority date, and then some people want to then pursue an EB-1A application showing they're at the top of their field, and then you can use that priority date. It kind of, that's what happens. I mean, not a lot of people, but that I talk to a lot of people from India that do want to kind of pursue that pathway. Maybe they've gotten perm, maybe they want to get an NIW, so that way they're able to actually like change jobs and not have to go through perm over and over again. And then they maybe work toward an EB-1A application, because at that point, hopefully, if you had gotten a previous priority date, your wait time will be very low, or maybe you would even be current at that point. So yeah, NIW definitely has a lot of benefits for those from India just because of the backlog. But again, I would have to kind of look at this person's individual, profile.
So this is just about payment. Is it required to pay the full amount of $9,605 upfront for the EB-2 visa application, or is there an option to make the payment in installments or through a payment plan?
Yeah, so we can do like 50% up front to get started, and then the 50% at the end before we file. So, these things take us like 3 to 5 months. So definitely would need the down payment to get started. And then over the next X amount of months, up until we're able to, submit, before we submit, we would just need the rest of it. So there is some wiggle room there.
Thank you. All right, that's all the questions.
All right, great. Thank you all so much for joining in.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.